of you here can teach this. Okay, we'll see. So I try to figure out what it is you really wanted from this in an hour and leave a little bit of time for questions. And so what I've done is I'm just telling you the parts that I think are important. This is really, from my perspective, using it in this job and try to come up with some samples. I'm not going to go into the data warehouse because that kind of wastes a lot of time waiting for it to finish. So I have screenshots of a lot of this stuff. The other thing it's not is I'm not telling you, here's how you would get this report. Here's all the filters. Here's all the selection criteria. Here's where I did, so you can always send me an email, or if you want to go deeper on some topic. This is, I hope you get, and I'm, obviously everything should have a goal. And my goal here is that you go away thinking you probably can answer any analytics that you need out of the data warehouse. There's a way to get a report that answers any of your questions. And I tried to focus on the kinds of questions that you might be trying to research from the budget office perspective. Okay, that said, let me start this little puppy. All right. And before I do that, let me share my. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Yes, I see some heads nodding. And now I don't know how to move my PowerPoint. Yep, there we go. Okay. All right, we're going to talk about some key information that I think is kind of important, that I think we leave off a lot of our data warehouse reports, and I'll talk about why I think they're important. I'm going to bring up a couple of definitions just because I'm going to use those words in this presentation. I want you to know what I mean when I say them. And then the third part, I've just got a lot of samples of things and reports that answer a particular question. And then I can take some questions from you guys if there's time. And get my watch off here so I can look at it without. Okay. All right. All right. So the key fields that I try to use all the time in my reports, and I'll tell you why. So first of all, I think it's important to understand that your campus department tree has been made available in the data warehouse. So if you're going to do any analytics from a divisional perspective or your campus organization, you need to bring in your campus department tree. And that's the only way you can get campus organizational reporting. Other than that, you're just getting a list of department IDs and you're looking at the whole thing. So if you're not going to go and look for department organizational stuff, you don't need it. But if you start to use a department level from the tree and you haven't brought the tree in, it doesn't stop you, and then it gives you really bad data. So, like you may have a total budget of 3 million, and all of a sudden you're looking at a fund and the budget's 12 million. And you say to yourself, well, what is wrong with that? And you check your criteria. It's because you're using the tree, but you didn't bring the tree in. And the software doesn't know what to do with that. So department tree is something to think about. Are you going to use it or not? I just kind of always bring it in. And especially if I'm in the revenue and expense world, which is where I usually am. Second field is CSU fund. I can't say enough about that. I believe that's the tie to what your money's about, what you can do with your money. And I call that governance. So if you're looking at a report with, 5 or 6 campus funds and you don't know the CSU fund, I think you've left a dimension of the information off. Whereas if you just bring in the CSU fund and then your campus fund, you're always going to categorize it by the governance. And I think it's a very important distinction. And I use that all the time. And I use it in conjunction with the firm's object code, which is a really great way to just start grouping and subtotaling your campus accounts, because a really common place I get irritated is when I bring in revenue accounts and campuses have had a revenue account for fall, one for spring, and blah, 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 but they didn't make them at the same time. So they're not together, but yet they're the sum of them is my tuition. And I can't get it. Well, if I throw the firm's object code in first, I'm automatically categorizing it by the area that I want to subtotal. So, and besides those being important to tell you something and to categorize kind of in an automated way, they're also what you've submitted to firms. to the chancellor's office. So they're the level of your, what I call your corporate reporting. Another reason to keep that, in front of your eyes whenever possible. So if you have the habit of bringing in, fund and account, I just think it's a little, there's a lot of information not there that you're missing by not including CSU fund and firm's object code. And then the bottom two are really just account category is a nice high level summary field for account. Brings in the sum of the first three characters of an account, like salaries, benefits, travel, different categories. And it's just a nice, it makes a smaller dashboard and lets you kind of see the report before you decide how granular you really need it. And meanwhile, just to keep it information, you bring in the department tree all the time, but you can make a tree for any of the 6 chart fields and bring those in for any kind of customized summarization or labeling that you'd like to do on a report. And this is really helpful. Sorry. This is really helpful if you're going to do auxiliary reporting. If you happen to be one of the campuses who have your auxiliaries, you can actually bring in reports that summarize the way the auxiliary board wants it to look and make a report out of the dashboard that you don't have to go. You may go make it pretty, for the board, but you could get the raw data already, summarized in the level that you want it. So these are really powerful, bringing in the trees for any of the chart fields, for example, fund, and I'll show you some examples of that. So anyway, I think these are just important things to know. I use them all the time, no matter what I'm going after. Any questions on that? I'm just I'm not sure how I'm doing questions. I think there's a hand raise thing, but I'll just look at I'll just wait till I hear you. And then we could use the chat function too, I guess. All right, I don't see any questions. So if you have any, whatever. And this is just me telling you about the CSU funds. I make this chart because I think we do have what I call the main operating areas on campus. And we have a 3-fund approach most of the time to how we set up an operating area. And we mirrored this on this with the way the state of California did it to us when we operated there. And we just carried that format forward. So for every operation, you have a 3-fund approach and you're operating in one fund, you do the M&R in another CSU fund, and you do the capital in a third. So every operating area has a 3-fund. And I like the display because I think when we think of CSU fund, we may go, oh, we have 25 and it feels like a lot. It really isn't, right? This is a really concise, this is the areas on campus that you're really trying to keep a handle on. And this is how you would bring the tree in. There's a paper on the CMS website on how to make a tree that is eligible for the data warehouse. And it's not very hard. I think you just have to put DW on maybe on this tree structure or something. It's really quite simple, but for people who make trees. But this is just a sample of the department tree is being brought in here, and a fund tree is being brought in for reporting. So this is bringing the tree in that would later be used within the report. And they're located in the advanced filters. So there's a row for department, fund, all of the trees. And then they just say department level 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to know what's on that level. And the same with fund 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you made the tree, you should know what the level is for. So this is an example using those 2 trees. So this is a simple report where you can see on column 1, department level 2 is the organization on campus. And this particular campus has categorized all of their funds into one of these words. So instead of seeing all these different funds, they just see the funds that are more the campus culture, shall we say, summarizing by division the funding that they have in all those different areas. So they use this different ways. I think it's actually used on some campus dashboards that they point to this tree also. But you can make these anything as far as the descriptions you're seeing here are the descriptions of the node on the tree that was made for the data warehouse. Questions on that? Okay, so bringing those trees in, you can really get the report to look any way you want. So the pages I'm going to talk about, next training we're having next Friday, I'm going to dive into labor cost distribution because there's brand new fields in there that are no place else but labor cost distribution. And I think it's important to know what kind of information's there. So we're going to look at that next time. So this time I'm going to go through the financial reporting dashboards and I don't know that I'm going to really show transaction inquiry. I might have one just example of that. So the first thing I want to talk about is just kind of how the dashboards were built and some of the wording that's used. The first two columns here, the word ledger and period, those are PeopleSoft definitions that you might be familiar with. So you can see the word actuals. So we all know that we have the actuals ledger. We have our encumbrances on the KK, DTL, ENC ledger and so forth. And then our accounting periods, we have period 0. Most of us understand that's a carry forward period. And accounting periods 1 through 12. Well, in the dashboard, they don't tell you that. They don't say accounting period 1 through 12. They don't say period 0. They don't say actuals. They say these words over on the left side. So whenever you see the words year-to-date actuals, obviously that's going to be periods 1 to 12. But if you see the word actuals, it's periods 0 through 12. And what I've got on these X's is there's a name that's used in many of the dashboard views, and I'm going to focus on views in a minute. When you see summarized, you're seeing probably the word actuals. That is not a dashboard that you're going to be able to pick out periods 1 through 12. But when you see the word standard, then you're going to see words like year-to-date actuals or prior year actuals. When you see prior year actuals, they're actually showing you period 0. And then you will see encumbrances and pre-encumbrances. The summarized and standard, and this is embarrassing, but it's just the truth, were used by the legacy financial accounting system back in 1999. And so they carried that word forward because everybody would feel so much closer to it and understand it. Everybody that's now dead, except some of us. So anyway, those are still the words. Those are what's there, and that's what they mean. So when you want to see really, you want to chop up those amount fields, you're looking for the word standard. You might even have, and we'll look at a couple, you might even see current month might be isolated. But when you just want a P&L with one amount for actuals, that's when you're going to see the word summarized. So you want to get a little comfortable with that. And then scenario, another great thing we did in the CSU, we standardized everything except that. And so campuses use that any way they want. And I'm going to talk about some really cool dashboards, but it's assuming your business practice using scenario. And there are no guidelines on scenario. But the dashboards use scenario. So when you're looking at a dashboard that says original budget, the definition comes from your scenario that you entered on the homepage. So let's say that you don't have a scenario for original budget, because there are campuses that use scenario, which like for they have a scenario for IFTs or a scenario for allocation orders, or scenario. It sounds more like a transaction type of a thing. They can't get original budget. If you don't have a scenario for original budget, you can't put anything on that. And then the current budget, if you see that word, it's basically all scenarios. You have, which should be your budget. Fiscal year budget, again, can't use that if you haven't defined it, but it's all the scenarios minus the original. Well, not really minus, I guess. It's all the scenarios that would include, maybe it is just, I think it is all the scenarios minus the original. Yes, sorry. So anyway, these are things like scenarios, the thing that matters how you're using it. And these words on the other left side, depending on the view as to which part of the ledger you're actually seeing in that amount. And so this display is telling you, and you may or may not be familiar with all these views. We'll look at a couple, but when you go into a dashboard like a financial summary by accounting period, summarized usually is the default. That's the first view. So by default, you're seeing those fields that we just talked about. But if you were to go look at what else is available, you'll see that there's a view called standard, or there's a standard with original budget. Remembering, you can only use standard with original budget for accurate data if you have a scenario that defines original budget. So there's two things to remember there. And then the X's are just telling you which of the major dashboards those views are available in. So there's two things we just talked through. There's basic amount fields that are in either summarized or standard or both, and then what they mean from PeopleSoft, which is the first two columns. So these in conjunction with the words you're seeing in the name of the view and which dashboard they're on, which is showing you the X. Any questions on that? That's a lot, I know. Okay. But you'll have the, huh?
Debbie, you're going to be sending us me a copy.
Yes, I'll give you the data. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're trying to say, what is it you're looking for, right? What kind of information do you want? And I really do like using the dashboards a lot of times to export to Excel. I mean, I don't know how many times I've made a dashboard and it's, 12,000 lines. Well, that's not a dashboard. I mean, that's not what it's designed for. It's designed to see, it should fit on your screen and give you some information. But a lot of us have to go through the weeds before we get to that summarized picture. So Excel pivots and whatever tool you like are really very helpful. So now I'm getting into examples of what we just saw, the summarized versus standard. So this is a sample of a report that I don't like. It's fund and account. So I know that it's EB001 and 13852, which doesn't tell me anything if I started working here yesterday. But if I threw CSU fund in here and firm's object code, it might tell me a little bit more. But you can see on the top, it says select report view, and it's summarized. So based on that chart we just saw, I now know the actuals that's displaying here is periods 0 through 12. In revenue and expense, you may not have brought forward period 0 in this particular fund because you didn't want project to date reporting. But say if we were looking at an M&R fund, you might have brought forward. And so that would be a cumulative picture of the expenditures for that fund. And from a budget perspective, you wouldn't be budgeting just for the current year. You'd want to budget for the whole project, or your balance available would be skewed. So that's kind of how the period 0 plays in with why you care what's in that number. If I look at the views here, I'm going to see other choices, and those choices are what I put on this slide. We now are looking at a financial summary as of, no, I think I'm on manage my budget. So summarized is a choice, and if I were to hit that arrow, I'd see I can also go summarized with pre-encumbrances, standard with original budget, and standard with pre-encumbrances. Those would be my choices on this report. Then this is another one, summarized with pre-encumbrances. So now you can see that they have encumbrances and balance available, reading across, and then they have total pre-encumbrances and then another balance available. And this example doesn't have any pre-encumbrances, but if it in a pre-encumbrances, your requisitions. And I don't know with Jagger if we have requisitions anymore. Will we? I don't know if anybody knows that. But if we do, I'm assuming that they would be here.
Yeah, it still feeds over into there, Debbie.
Okay, cool.
From Jagger, and if they do it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Some campuses don't do requisitions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the standard. So now we have different amount fields because of the format. And the amount fields here, you can see we get month to date encumbrances, the current budget, prior year actuals, year to date actuals. That's the total, and encumbrances and balance available. Again, this correlates back to what I put on the other graph. So if you wanted to see exactly the ledger and the accounting period that is included in these, that's on that chart I gave. Standard with original budget, again, can't use this unless you put a scenario with original budget and told the dashboard what to put there. This report will still display, and you'll still get a current budget and an original budget. And you could have filled in something on the first page, but if it doesn't represent your actual original budget, it wouldn't be correct. So there has to be a correlation between how how you're using your scenarios. And this is also showing account category that I mentioned, which is instead of account, it's a higher level aggregate of the different categories of each account. Summarized by period. This particular one is probably my favorite report, and we'll look at it again later, but it's the report that shows you prior year actuals, then it shows you your current budget, all your 12 accounting periods, encumbrances, and balance available. And while I'm not a fan of this report to really read, what's going on, I love it for projections and dumping it to Excel and using it at various levels in order to do projections. Okay, questions on that? That's sort of the architecture of the dashboard and the things I think once you know those things and what each dashboard does for you and how the amounts are there and using the CSU fund with the firm's object code and your campus organization and specialty trees, that now you have different business needs to go use those dashboards. So any questions on anything that I've said so far? Anybody? Nope. Okay, doke. Sherry, I have a question. Why are you here? I heard you retired.
Retiring.
Are you? Well, congratulations.
Yes.
Congratulations.
13 more days. So.
Oh, good. I'm glad I got to see you. I hope you have a great retirement.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So sample information you can report on. These are just the things I came up with that we can go over. I think when you're new, it'd be nice to be able to get a chart of accounts that you understood. A high-level summary of all the funds that you have on the state side, I think is worth seeing. Expenditure patterns over multiple years, various payroll information, and we'll do a lot more in that category next week. Expenditure projections, review base monies versus one time, review multi-funded projects over multiple years, and then a deep dive on any department, division, program, or project. And there's a couple more, maybe monitoring. I think I threw 2 more on here. Monitoring dormant funds and managing your benefit pool. So those are all different business practices that that I'm gonna kind of go over. All right, so this is a chart of accounts, and I don't really care about an amount here. I'm just trying to get aggregate information of the chart of accounts being used. And again, I like throwing in more than just, my fund. It doesn't tell me enough. So starting with the highest level of our accountability, for lack of a better word, we've got the state controller's fund, and then I have the CSU fund, and then I have my campus fund, and then the CSU fund type, and that might be a field you're not familiar with. And just for whatever, you're being recorded for giggles, net asset category. So this is starting with that high level, whoops. And back. General fund, state controllers fund. And I wanted to quit using your mouse. Oh my God. So the CSU fund type, we have 2 major business practices within finance, and that is we operate at the state controller's office for certain monies that are held in the state treasury. And how we look at them from an accounting perspective is different. How we manage them in accounts payable is different. And then we have all the monies that we have in the bank. And basically that's State Fund 948. And it's most of our operating activity. But the CSU fund type tells you that basic information as to where that fund is being held accountable. So if it says SCO, that's going to be in state treasury. And if it says CSU, that's going to be in the bank. So these fund types are, see if I can get a little, nope. Try that again. There it is. So the fund types are over here. And GG would be governmental. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Executive Order 1000, but it sort of defines all of our activity into these accounting categories and the kind of monies that we have. So proprietary enterprise, that's the kind of monies that these are. And then we get into CSU, proprietary enterprise, and that's monies held in the bank. So a chart, and this goes on for a couple more pages. And my next slide, basically, you could dump this down to Excel and make it a smaller report and something you could put, say, on your on your desktop. And you can collapse it even smaller. You could just have it collapsed at the CSU fund level. But you can see here 948 has lots of CSU funds. And then here's the campus funds, and then the fund type and the net asset category. So it's a comprehensive chart of accounts. It gives you a lot of information about, all the different types of activities that you have and how they're classified and whatnot. So I think it's a really good tool for chart of accounts. Any questions on that? Okey-dokey.
Debbie, this is Jenny.
Jenny.
I'm learning stuff, so thank you very much.
Excellent, dear.
We should do this much more often. I hope everybody else is enjoying it too. You've got little nuggets that I had no idea existed.
Oh, I hope you have lots of nuggets when we're done.
I bet. Thank you, though.
Cool. All right. And then this is the fund balance dashboard. This is the one I take anybody who I ever work with and it's their first time to this dashboard. Because if you don't put any selection criteria on it, and you don't put in your PeopleSoft fund, just put in your state fund and your CSU fund, it's a very manageable dashboard. It is longer than this is showing, but it has about maybe 7-8 more lines, but it is all the money. It's all of it. And it starts with your equity at July. It shows you your year-to-date revenue, your year-to-date expense, and then your calculated equity as of today. But it's the ballpark, right? And so it's a great dashboard to get used to and looking at, where all your money is. And you can add PeopleSoft fund, and you can look at things like, you could look at upside down equity, right? Maybe we're reporting in firms and we're good, but at the PeopleSoft fund, you've got a fund with upside down equity, and it's very easy to see because it's going to be blue, right? And so that's another thing these dashboards are great for, is just doing a quick review of the monies that you're accountable for. Questions on that one? That was kind of, you probably already do this. I just think anything that can put my world on one page is a good thing.
Debbie, can I just add one thing from a system perspective that I think is so important that you're sharing here about grabbing like a CSU fund? Because oftentimes when you're talking to us at the system office, or we're having conversations with your university, like that is the world we're looking at. So even if you're focused on or managing a budget at a smaller level, I think it's okay, but just to understand how does it roll up and that you're not missing pieces of the puzzle, because we encounter this often because there is more out there, and just having an awareness is so important. And so I love that you're showing how it rolls up in these dashboards. So thanks, Debbie.
Yeah, it's I think just I really believe just bringing that CSU fund in, you're learning without knowing it. I don't know how else to say that, right? Okay, so this is reviewing costs over multiple years, and I just happened to pick risk pool. This particular campus uses their accounts to isolate the actual payment of the premium versus the recharge that they're getting back from the people that are part of it. So it's kind of a nice thing to watch the flow of what's been going on with the risk pool. So a lot of times, especially in the budget office, you want to look and see, are you coming into a huge increase? Is it really over time? It's been fine. Has it been funded properly? All those kinds of things. This could all be very different based on your selection criteria and what you choose to put in here. It's also good because let's say that you happen to be looking at a cost that is spread across multiple departments just because maybe it has multiple managers, or heaven forbid, it's because it's different program codes, which don't get me started. But for whatever reason, you have different dept IDs. So this you don't have to bring in debt ID, so you end up looking at a consolidated report of the costs over time, whereas you may find it harder to do that if it's in separate departments. You can bring them together for your review. Okay, so this dashboard is my favorite. I love it. Nobody uses it, but that's okay. This is in the, it's called Inception to Date. And in M&R, we bring forward a lot of our projects, and we do a project tree. And part of our year-end close process is to say, go to that yes, no, no, and roll over our projects. And what's happening, I'm sure not on your campuses, what's happening on some campuses, and we're getting like 100, 300 projects on that tree, and nobody's reviewing whether they're done or not, and you're rolling everything forward to the beginning of time. And the project probably ended 4 years ago. And the thing about rolling it forward was so you could get a view of it, so you can see the whole picture. But in the dashboard, when you're looking at a revenue and expense summary that you've rolled forward to period 0, you can't drill on period 0, right? You can't drill on it. It's just a carry forward number. You'd have to go back to the year before, and for anyone that any amounts that were carried forward that year, you go back and that to the year before that, and so on and so forth. In this dashboard, across the top, it's putting the year the activity happened, and it's all drillable. Now, this is the summary one that's project actuals by year. And what you can see is you've got in the very first year, and remember, I've just brought in the funds in the CSU fund, or the account category, CSU fund over here. So in the regular parking fund, the first year they spent out of the parking fund, which is pretty common. And nothing got spent in the bond fund. But in the second year, you can see all the transactions got transferred to the bond. You actually can see the activity, and sometimes you can have 3, 4 multiple funding sources here, right? And then you can see the bond got spent most of the time, and we got a little something going on here. And then we had a little extra to close it out that we spent down here. So it's a really good, and if I want to drill on any of these transactions, all of these amounts are drillable in the year that they happen. So it's a really good dashboard for looking at a project that you've had, you know, I call them projects from hell, but basically if you have anything multi-funded or multiple bonds or multiple funding sources, and as long as you've used the same project in all your activities, you get a nice view of the whole thing on the inception to date dashboard. Okay, if you are a campus that uses scenario to track your budget, and this is a common set of scenarios, these are familiar, these are kind of what I had when I was working. So one scenario means your initial base, that's like the beginning of the year before you've gone into the new monies. Additional base would sort of equal your sources and uses that came in the B memo. Some of us isolated any base increases from comp just so we could go grab them in a quicker way. And then regular transfers of any of that base that you moved around on your campus. So if I'm in year 1, those are my scenarios, then that becomes my total base at the end of the year, which will become next year's initial base. What many, I don't want to say many, some campuses do is run allocation orders out of year 1 and use those to populate the budget in year 2. So you carry it, you don't have to manually enter your budget. You're going to do it automatically from by running an allocation using your scenarios. So this is just a conceptual picture. And then this is a dashboard, say, of student affairs. And there's the scenarios on campus. And basically these scenarios, and it looks like they've made some choices over time. Some of these could probably be consolidated. But really, these are base scenarios versus one time. And so I could go in here and pick all the base scenarios. Here's additional base, and there's transfers of base. There's a comp base. There's the initial base, and I sum those. And if we summed those, they would be the initial base in year 2. So you can actually, this is over time. These are years. You can actually watch the base and how it got developed over the years to where it is today. And then prior year carry forward, and then prior year encumbrances, and then the others are one time. And basically the one times, really, if the way we work in the CSU for the most part, we budget our equity. So the one times would equal should equal your equity. That would be something you could actually check. But that's only if that's how you're using scenario. And I use scenarios a lot for a quick review that my ledger's accurate, because the total of these scenarios is predetermined. I know my carry forward number, that happened in July, and it's going to stay the same all year. I know my encumbrance, that's the encumbrances I closed the books with last year. And then I want my base between, I've got my account type here. My base between revenue and expense should always be equal. That should net to 0. And then any additional base, I got revenues and I scheduled them, that should net to 0. And my current year transfers should all net to 0. So a lot of times, especially with our transfers in and transfers out, which are happening more now because of some of the M&R stuff, a lot of times you'll have this out of balance, since it basically somebody did a one-sided entry. So this is a great quick review, right? I'd always run like a month in, just knowing that everything was kind of lined up. Again, if you're using scenarios that way. Questions on that? Nope. And then this is that dashboard I told you I like, just using it for projections. And this is just looking at academic affairs. And we're seeing that, what they spent by month, and it gets you in the ballpark, right? I mean, it's not rocket science, a lot of it, because so much of our expenditures are payroll related. But it shows you the last 3 months are still to be projected. Looks like 4 months actually. And again, you can use these expenditure patterns to try to get an idea. Again, I would always dump this to Excel. So this is the high level summary of all divisions in 485 without all the detail. This is a very summarized picture of where we are at the beginning, in total by division. And it's using obviously the department tree to get this. And I use this a lot, but normally this one for me is, I use revenue and expense, and then I do this summary. And one of the things to do, you can think about, everybody has a university wide, but using your department tree to break down university wide to the way you'd like to look at it for management as level 2 is kind of nice too, because then you could either drill here or go just look at the next level of the central wide and get a nice breakdown of this, because obviously that credit's being caused by the general fund transfer in. And this is going down one more level. So now I'm picking up the colleges and academic affairs. So I'm using academic programs, and then you come into department level 4 and get the breakdown at the next level, basically. And that concept is in all the trees that you do, however you would build your tree. And this is one, I'm just showing this. So this is the projection one. And I just think it's something we don't do enough. I do it all the time just in case I'm missing something. But this is showing, I'm going to go look at projections. So I'm looking at the colleges, and I'm going to do salaries and benefits and blah, 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 blah. And then I'm going to be done. Then I'm going to do the college of business and do blah, 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 blah. And then I'm done. But if I just switch this column with this column, now I'm going to do all of my salaries and wages together. Right? And then I'm going to do all my benefits together. And then I'm going to do all my blah, blah, blah. So it depends on how you want to do it. But I tend to want to do this organizationally, right? Because we always want to know, how are they doing? How's the college doing? And I do it. But then if I'm in a hurry and I really just want to know where we are as a campus, I always do this one because I don't want to go down to the next level. I just want to know how the campus is doing. So it just shortens my projections, my time a lot to get an idea where the campus is heading. Does that make sense? Switching those two, you can just get a whole different view. Again, if you export this, then you end up with this, obviously a much more concise document, and you can use formulas off to the, I've done a quicken projection just with formulas. I do one that takes the last period times the number of periods left. And then I do another one that takes an average of the time left. And I have the two, and then I visually look at the two to see is anything really an anomaly. And 20 minutes later, I've done projections for the whole campus. It's just, and I'm not very different than the 17-month thing it takes when you ask them what they want, what it should be. Because that could take forever, right? And it's not ever that far off. Again, this is, we've talked about those custom trees, and this is another example. This campus had a custom account tree where they itemized, or they had nodes for salaries, benefits, and other operations. And that's 3 numbers for the whole total. So I'm just bringing that in. It's the same way, it's the same dashboard, but now instead of all that lower level data, I'm looking at it from a very high level here, right? It's summarizing all salaries, all benefits. When you build your tree, remember that this dashboard, especially if it's a custom tree and it's yours, this dashboard does things alphabetically. So sometimes I'll put a letter or a number in front of this when I'm building a custom tree, like 1 dash blah, 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 2 dash blah, 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 so that I get salaries, benefits, and O&E. I want that order because it's just what we're all used to. And I don't have to go fix it, especially if you're doing a auxiliary report and they're persnickety. So think about your order of how you want that tree to display when it's used, and see if you, and try not to be, because it's going to print there, right? So you try not to be overly whatever, text heavy, but you just want to be able to control the sort. Okay, this is my favorite dashboard in the beginning of time, and it's my biggest gripe. So we let people have funds all the time because they scream loud enough. We give them a fund, and we don't have a real principle for when we will establish a fund. We'll give you a fund for $3,000. We'll give you a fund for whatever. We'll give you a fund even though we think we shouldn't give you a fund. But then, I'm trying to move you guys where we can see this. There we go. What I've got here is equity by year, and I'm not showing you campus or anything. There's other information here, like funds, and there was hundreds of them. Some were 0. This is a formula where I say, if the equity is the same in the last 2 years, please put the amount in this column. So that makes me, and then I sort where I get rid of all the zeros because those people are changing equity. And I can see this particular fund has not changed since 2017. It would be good to talk to somebody about that. This one has been 2 years. This one has been 3. This one has been 4. And you get my point. You're looking for funds that are dormant, that should be closed, that maybe it's a giant pot of money that your president might like. Especially in 485, we're starting to get really fund happy in that fund. In my career up until 2006, we had one fund. Because in 2006 is when you were allowed to have do what you wanted. Prior to that, you were in the general fund, and everything you did had to be done there. And so, but what that means is you manage it with budgets. And so what's happening now in our world is we're starting to manage some of these with funds, but we're not really maintaining the fund. It's the software is. Because it's a fund, you get equity, you can spend, and it closes. But we should still understand why we have funds for $1,000 for 10 years that we've never closed, $14 million for whatever that we've never, anyway, so we should look at these and understand why it's being kept with no activity. So I love this dashboard. Do it all the time. Okay. This is just managing the benefit pool. If you budget your benefit pool in a 603 account, some of us budgeted in a supplies and service account but don't put it in benefits, so that for the account category 603, you actually grab your benefit pool. Then using your organization tree, these are all the budget amounts that have been moved or stored from the pool. And we can see that the pool is, where's the pool? Well, that's not, I typed something here and did not fix it. This is correct. But we can see we have $12 million and 27 left total. And so that's going to be enough to cover the next 2 months. But you can monitor your benefit pool from, this is the one, the current budget one, if you budget your benefit pool in 603. And this net number is bad because I actually typed this to try to make it more understandable. So yeah, so it's by division and whatnot. And it's another way to track your benefit pool just in a quick and dirty way instead of anything that's labor intensive. All right, those are my sample business practices. And I got questions. Anybody want any questions or any how-tos or see anything else again? Bada boom, bada boom.
Thank you, Debbie. Please raise your hand if you have, that's a lot of information. Debbie, I'm still processing.
I got Elizabeth with her hand up. Where's Elizabeth?
Oh, I apologize. I was trying to clap. I was just telling you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm newer to this, and I just like the way that you explained everything. It really helped me take like a step back and look at it from a different perspective. So I'm just appreciative. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Clark, did you have a question? You were clapping. Oh, that's nice.
No, I was always very appreciative on trying to figure out my way around data warehouse. Always.
Yeah, there's a lot of dashboards, but I think the bigger thing is trying to figure out what your question is. And then it's, you should be able to find the answer in there somewhere.
Exactly. This is our time with Debbie. Please feel free. This is a safe space to ask questions. I'm pretty sure that if it's in your mind, it's also on other people's minds. So please raise your hand or just speak up. We have 10 more minutes.
Yep. Not too bad.
Yeah. Yesenia.
Yeah, hi. Good morning. Yeah, my question is, I noticed that, so you're doing expenditure projections. You're using it as a budgeting tool, or do you also have another budgeting tool? What do you do?
No, I've never worked with a budget software. I have worked with one that grabbed everybody like in July and permanent people and gave me the annualized value of them for budget development. But we used it as a one and done, like to start the year. Nothing that we always assessed that we didn't have the staff to maintain it, right? Every single labor change. but no, I haven't had a budget tool. This is, I think one of the things I didn't go into here, it's a little bit business process heavy, but I always had another ledger, another budget ledger, budget only. And I called it two different places, but I called it the base ledger. So basically, anytime I did a transfer with that base scenario, I had to do it in my base ledger. But what I could do in my base ledger was make something permanent for next year. And what I mean by that is, say I had a reorg in January. Well, in the operating budget, I'd move 6 months. But in the base ledger, I'd go ahead and move all 12 months because I was going to use that to feed the budget next year. Mm-hmm. So I called that base budget accounting. So yes, I think I had a tool for doing my budget, and I think we all do it on spreadsheets, right? What do I have to remember for next year that's permanent? And so for me, I did it on the base ledger. And for my sophisticated end users, I teach them that we had that, and they could pull it up in the data warehouse because it says ledger. You have to put in your budget ledger. So you can even start to work with it. I didn't make it it wasn't a big campus business practice. It was mine. And that's where I did base budget accounting. But for the more sophisticated savvy users, they could always, and I liked them to look at it because they were validating that I had everything. You know, that I'd even do things like, you know how you get the retirement for this year, we're going to get a IFT sometime in April. Well, I would go ahead and give it to all the users and draw my university wide into a negative. And then when I got the IFT, I would just fill my hole, right? But I could check things like, I could always go look at them. I could always, I could communicate with my boss and what he could look at, if we had contingency, and I'd make sure the transactions, were clear. So there's ways you can use the software to replace a spreadsheet in your drawer. That I think that's the biggest thing, is that it's a little bit more formal. If it, but it needs to be, you got to use it that way, right? You got to use it. I think everyone's doing this. They're just all doing it however we all do it, right? You have to answer those questions. Yeah, but I tried to store it in the software.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Jerry?
Yeah, so Debbie, in the system budget office with our folks, and all my team is on here too, we don't necessarily need to go in data warehouse a lot, right? Because we're not looking at the detail that a campus would, and that I worked with you at Dominguez Hills on.
Right.
So, but can you, from a budget perspective, central or otherwise, at a campus, what's the value that you see on the firm's gaps side of the reports for us? Or is it predominantly like the financial reporting that's better? I feel like in the past, maybe some of the firm's options to filter stuff were available on the firm side, but not the financial reporting. But now I don't feel like, it seems like they all exist both places. So is there any benefit that, like, oh, if you're doing this, the firm's gap stuff would be better than using the financial reporting stuff? So.
Right. Well, definitely the first thing off the top is the only place the NACUBO program code lives is on the firm's dashboard. So, and that's kind of your department. That's kind of your review of department, right? So what you can do there is, if you looked at your firm's object code and added in department, you now see what the campus is really doing. Like, you're asking a question about firm's program code, blah, but if you see 32 departments, you realize it's really 32 questions to the campus. So that relationship you can see really well in the firm's dashboards. From a campus perspective, I like using those firms' dashboards, except you've all changed this since, I think, the last 2 years. I liked using it as the basis for my firm submission because it was already in the right format. It was my prior year pattern. So if nothing was really materially changing, I would up it for enrollment increase, but the butter would get spread based on that dashboard. I thought that was because it was already in that format with the NACUBO program code. But yeah, I think it's the reason I would hang out there would be because it seems like you might always want to get back to that NACUBO program code, and it isn't in the other dashboards. But you could end up in the other dashboards if you really wanted to dig in more to a question you had in those firms' dashboards, the granularities in those other dashboards.
If we're sticking to like an object code sort of summary, we should be getting the same answer out of both sides, right? Okay.
We have we have a business rule that those two dashboards have to be the same at the fund and account level. So you should feel comfortable that they're not.
As long as we've done our settings right, of course, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can also user error.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. User defined, as they say. Right. Yeah.
Thanks, totally. Debbie.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Well, thank you. And I don't know if you
so
guys
much, Debbie.
Payroll, but we'll dig into payroll next week.
Yes. So next Friday,
Mhm.
I can't remember what time it was. I think it's the same time. So
Okay, cool.
thank you, everyone. Well, hold on. Let me just double check that because I just April 24 at yes at 10 o'clock. Thank you, everyone.
All right, guys, have a
Bye.
great
Thank
day.
you. Have a great weekend.
Weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.